Shio, today is April 29th, 2020. I'm joined with Chief Sneed and Treasury Secretary Corey Blankenship. We've gotten some updates from Harrah's management about some numbers now. Can we kind of talk about that and moving forward what that looks like?
Yeah, we had a meeting with council and also with the TCGE board and the general manager of our Harrah's property, the resort property. And we have said all along in our conversations, that we recognize that even once we do reopen, right, that we are certainly not going to be at the level of revenue and the number of guests visiting as we had prior to the shutdown. So we were thinking here locally at about 70% of the previous revenue was where we would be at, and that was what the property was kind of projecting. Unfortunately, there are all these unknowns. There's variables all over the place. We don't know what the new normal is going to look like. We don't know how many guests are going to be comfortable coming out when we do finally reopen. Right. And so Caesars Corporate is actually advising their properties to consider being at about 30 to 40% of previous revenue projections. So it's a substantial hit. The worst case scenario is that we're only making 30 to 40% of what was projected. 70% is better. That's still a 30% reduction, right, which is also substantial. So we wanted to just update the public. And again, just trying to full transparency so everybody knows what's going on. And
right,
there's not misinformation out there.
Why we have to make the decisions we have to make moving forward. Corey, tell me about how that affects our fiscal year 20 and 21 budget.
So we'll have an impact on fiscal year 20 for the remainder of our fiscal year, which will carry us through September 30th of this year. And so what we're looking at are cost control measures that we can put in place. So we have a very fortunate position in that we don't budget 100%
right,
of casino gaming revenues. And so we have that cushion in place and also have a healthy level of reserves that we can sustain operations. But just because we can sustain operations doesn't mean that we have to that we cannot plan
right,
for how to get through this particular situation. So some of the things that we're looking at is the majority of our expenditures occur in three categories: personnel, contractual expenses, and then capital expenditures. So we're looking at ways from now until the end of the fiscal year to limit our expenses in those particular areas while maintaining employment, maintaining our workforce, right, and maintaining our services. So I think what you'll see is a greater level of efficiency from our tribal programs and how they deliver
right,
service. For next year, we're actually going to take an ultra-conservative approach to how we budget. And so, as Chief has already mentioned, the property is optimistic that they can achieve 70%. Caesars Corporate is saying brace for 30 or 40. And so we've kind of shifted our focus to the middle ground there, looking at a baseline of about 50% of gaming operations and gaming distribution coming over to the tribal government. And so what we'll look at, again, is those three main expense categories, right, and say, how do we build a budget that eliminates or minimizes expenses in those particular areas? And then for our tribal programs to know that this is a very fluid situation,
right?
There's a lot of uncertainty about how we're going to be able to perform. So once we have a better understanding of what business looks like, then we can make adjustments to our budget, either up or down, depending on where we need to be and where we need to go. I think the silver lining in all of this is that the tribe has taken, under this administration, the most conservative approach to budgeting in the history of the tribal government. And so we're not budgeting 100% of casino projection. We're only budgeting 80% of casino projection.
Right.
And so this move, it sounds like, we're cutting the budget by half, but it's really only a move from 80% to 50%. Still significant,
right,
but completely manageable.
Right. And let's talk about that. Why do we do that budgeting like that?
Well, my approach from the outset has always been to, like, as an individual, to not live beyond my own means, right? But applying that same logic to governments, because governments, like individuals, can go broke.
Right.
And so it's only it's prudent to be conservative in our approach. To me, it's irresponsible to assume that a projection, and that's all it is pardon me, is a projection, that projection will ultimately come to fruition. It might, and sometimes in years past, they've even outperformed. The casinos have outperformed the projection.
Right.
But it's more prudent and more responsible to budget, in my opinion, well below that. My goal all along has been to get us to 75% of that projection, and then with the excess, we have reserves, and we can also invest, the overages,
right,
and generate even more revenue
while still providing top-notch services
Correct.
and protecting the health and welfare of the public,
Absolutely.
we're still going to offer those.
Right. And the reason we've been able to continue to pay our employees to stay at home and during this pandemic is because of the reserves that we have, because of our conservative approach. And the other part people have to understand as well is that even if, like we're talking about reopening and we're working on our plans for what an incremental reopening of tribal operations looks like, even when we reopen the tribe, until the casino reopens, the end result is still the same. We're burning through our reserves. So we need the casinos to reopen. They're working on a very comprehensive plan to make sure that is done in a way that is ensuring the health and welfare of the employees, of the guests. But we've got to get revenue coming back in, and that's not just us; that's the entire country.
Right, and I think what's great about this is we're not just asking the public to look at the way they spend money and look at the way that they budget and do things. We're taking it head on ourselves as a government and saying, look, we're going to have to make adjustments too because we only have so much revenue coming in. Actually, at this point, we have none coming in, and so we're facing that challenge ourselves and saying we're going to adjust how we do things as well, while still providing the things that are necessary for our public to live healthy and happy.
Absolutely.
Good. Okay. Well, if things as things come along and we can update them, let's talk about that with the public and share
Absolutely.
that. Thank you, guys. We'll talk to you again soon. If you have any questions, please post it on our Facebook. Data Dog, you.